Please attend a call meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 6 p.m., Monday, May 13, 2013, for the purpose of a public works session. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed session by order of the mayor. Mr. Cherry?
Here.
Mr. Edmonds?
Here.
Mr. Meeks?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons? Here. Ms. Randall?
Here.
Mayor Wright?
Here.
Mr. Rowe?
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Because it's fresh and because it relates very much to the budget, I want to first start off with a report about our trip to New York last week. As you know, your team went up there, the mayor, myself, Carol, and Patrick, along with our financial advisors and the actuary that's helping us do the hard work that we need to do on this pension obligation bond. We started off by telling them that we had been up to New York just this past November, and we did because of the bond issue that we issued in December. And we reminded them, which we did not have to do, that they expressed two grave concerns at that time. One was our liability and unfunded liability in the pension systems, the two. And the other was our liability in what's called other post-employment benefits, OPEB. They said those are two concerns that could negatively impact our credit rating going forward. The city team in November said, we'll work on the most critical and come back with a solution. And the most critical of the two at that time was the pension obligation bonds. And once we get a solution for that, we'll come back with the solution for our ways to address OPEB, OPEB. And so the meetings went well. We met with Standards & Poor first, and then Moody's, and then with Fitch's. Very good meetings. Each one lasted more than 2 hours, more like 2.5 hours, pushing 3. A lot of good dialogue, a lot of good questions. We really put forth a good credit profile for the city. We talked about the good things that are happening here with our economy, that the economy is coming back, and we can see that in our unemployment rate is dropping. When you look at people's ability to buy houses, if you compare the length of time that a house was on the market for 2011, which happened to be 101 days on the average, it dropped to 66 days in 2012. And these are important data points. We talked about how strong our two funds are, the fund balance in the general fund and in the utility fund. Then we got into a discussion about our economy in greater detail, the things that are happening that we said were going to happen, like the opening of Chick-fil-A. And that may not be sound like a big deal when you're in downtown Manhattan with skyscrapers at, what's the average, 40, 50, 60 feet? But let me tell you, we got their attention by saying this is the largest footprint of a Chick-fil-A on the East Coast. And we got some wows back on that. And when we started talking about the return on the investment, when we talked about Kroger's, is now the contracts are signed, and that we hope to see them start construction in September. One question was, well, how quickly will that get built? And when you talk about more than $1 million worth of sales, that's a lot of per week. That's a lot of shopping carts going out the door. We spent an awful lot of time talking about the uncertainty with the federal budget and that famous term, sequestration. That's a big concern. There's a good chance that they're going to put Loudoun County on a credit watch because of the uncertainty. I think we impressed them by virtue of the fact that we had taken the initiative to analyze the impact of sequestration prior to the event taking place. And even though on a regional level, the Department of Defense accounts for 46% of our budget on a region, in Portsmouth, and you may find that this is a number that sounds low, it's 12.8%. And that's even given the fact that we got these two major facilities here, the Norfolk Naval Shipyard and the hospital plus the Coast Guard. But we were able to have a very good conversation there. We spent a lot of time on what we intend to do. And it was really interesting to watch the understanding develop as we got into this story. One of the analysts with S&P said, "Oh yeah, I got it. What you're doing is trading one liability, the liability that we have with the benefits, that's like vapor. You know, you can't put your arms around it because you don't know exactly how long people are going to live once they retire, or how long their spouses might live, for another liability that is fixed." And we emphasize the stability aspect of this plan, that it's not just about arbitrage. Arbitrage is when you borrow money at one rate and invest it at another rate to earn the difference. It's more about stability for our budget, because once we issue the bonds, we'll know what the arc is. The arc is going to equal our debt service, and no longer will it be one of these moving targets that's not moving downward but moving upward. And so all in all, it was a good discussion. But we still have work to do with the bond rating agencies, because in November we promised them two things: a solution for the cash problem in our pension plan. And we talked about the civic engagement that we had in this process. But if you recall, we started working on this in January, and we've had public meetings and public hearings. We've actually taken the conversation to such places as the Hampton Roads Chamber. We want people to understand what we're doing and get their input. And I told them that we found the best way is to take it down to dollars and cents, that every pension plan has two components, liabilities and assets, that the simple equation is for every dollar's worth of liability, there needs to be a dollar's worth of assets, and we have 28 cents against the dollar in one plan and 32 cents against the dollar in the other plan. I want to refresh your memory tonight about the other big concern, and that's the other post-employment benefit, which is primarily and only made up of the contribution that we make towards health insurance for our employees. And that can vary from anywhere from 44% to 64% of the cost, depending on which plan they choose, whether it's one person or the family, or if it's got dental or vision or whatever. Now, this sounds like something that's really arcane, but it's a big deal. Our liability, and I want you to look at this piece of paper that's before you, this spreadsheet. Our total unfunded liability in other post-employment benefits totals $196 million. The precise number you'll find under the column FY 2012, it's $195,796,500. Now, although it's not reflected in the actuarial study, we have an actuarial study done every 2 years. We actually have $5,500,000 that the city has contributed in the past to. You don't have one?
What's there?
No, I don't have that sheet.
Oh, we
That's
got-
all.
We need one.
We need one. Wait a minute, here it is. I
I'm
see
sorry.
this one here.
Okay.
Okay, it was stuck
Got
in
it?
some other papers I found.
You can pass that out so that everybody can.
Yes, we need to look at these figures.
When you add that asset and do the math, we're funded at less than 3 cents. And we thought at 28 cents against the dollar was bad, and 32 cents, we're less than 3 cents against the dollar on our other post-employment benefit. And we got some work to do. They're not going to let us skate by and not address this issue. In fact, what we have is a pay-as-you-go situation. And let me create a scenario for you. Let's say that we hire somebody that's already got 27 years worth of service in the Virginia retirement system. They want to come to work for the city of Portsmouth because it's a promotion. And that they're age 52. And they work for us for 3 years and then retire at age 55. We start paying other post-employment benefits as if they were our employee for the whole 30-year period of time.
That's so stupid.
Now, yeah, that's,
Stupid.
we need to have some thought as to whether or not we want to have some type of threshold that, yeah, even though you might be vested in retirement, you have to be with the city a certain number of years before you're eligible for other post-employment benefit. Because a large portion of that liability occurred when they were not even our employee. They may live for another 40 years and have a great life. But our current plan is a defined benefits plan. And so it's whatever the cost is 20 years out from when they retire. Now contrast that with a defined contribution where a new employee comes to work and says, we tell that new employee, when you retire, we'll pay you $200 a month. And that's it, it's fixed. You can use that towards your medical expenses in any fashion that you want. So we need to give some thought to that. And so not only do we need to put cash into the plan, we have an opportunity to define exactly how the plan's going to be or should be. But this is a real liability because the way the credit agencies look at it is that this is a liability that occurs during the year that you work, even though you don't pay it maybe for another 15 years when the person's retired. If the liability occurred during this year, then it should be funded during this year. And that's how that liability gets accrued. It's the same type of methodology that they use on the pension plan. So it's not that we've skated through and we did have a great trip. And I don't want to jinx it by saying it was good. But we have another bear facing us. And as you can see, our ARC, the amount of money that we should be paying annually now approaches more than $16 million a year. And we're only funding the ARC at just shy of 29%. We were very proud of the fact that we were able to tell the bond rating agencies and kind of pull on our lapels and that we have a history of paying 100% of the ARC on the pension plan. That's not the case here on other post-employment benefits. So I'm not trying to rain on our parade, but we need to be realistic about where we are financially.
And didn't this used to not count as a liability? Isn't this kind of new as being listed as a liability or something?
It is. It's always been a liability, but the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which we call GASB, realized that we need to report this They have a great report and they've titled it "Written in Plain English" that I'll send the members of council. It's about 30 pages long, and it goes into more detail than what I'm talking about here. But we need to give it some thought, because we can change the rules for new employees. It doesn't have to be a defined benefits plan for new employees. That's one way of limiting your cost, and that truly puts you on a pay-as-you-go basis. We can change the rule about how much time that you need to be with the city. We could have a sliding scale that says the threshold amount of time is 5 years, and then if it's from 5 to 10, you get 50%, or I'm making this up, but you can come up with a way that you got one person that's been here 3 years and one that's been here 30 years, and they're both going to get the same benefit. How fair is that? Not too fair. Not really fair to your balance sheet.
I guess one of my concerns is using the scenario you had there. If you brought in that individual at 52 years of age and he's had all of that experience in other jurisdictions, why aren't those other jurisdictions on the hook for all of those years? I mean, if we bring, I mean, it's almost discriminatory, because
It is.
I wouldn't be inclined to hiring anybody at that age to come and work here the last couple of years and be on the hook for all of that.
That's a very good point. And the problem is that their other post-employment benefit might be less than ours. They may pay a lesser amount. They may have a defined contribution. You'll find them all over the map. So what we're going to do a benchmark study and find out what is the menu of other post-employment benefit plans in the state. Come up with what ours is, which I think is primarily anecdotal, and give you a recommendation of what you ought to consider to adopt going forward.
That wasn't addressed by VRS when VRS became the...
No, sir. It has nothing to do with DRS, but it's what we decide to pay in the way of benefits other than retirement to our retirees. And for us, it is health insurance. And for us, it's the variety of health insurance. We have the HMO plan, we have the primary physician plan, we got the dental plan, we got the eye plan. So you can't predict what the person's going to pick when they retire, and that's part of the problem. And so we need to try to dimension the problem to the greatest extent that we can, so we can put our arms around it and say, yeah, we can live with that number. Right now, this is a scary number, $195 million.
How's that compare with other cities in Hampton Roads?
Don't know. And again, it all depends on how much they pay and what their plan is, but we're going to get that information.
Be interesting to
Yes, sir.
see what their plans, how they address that.
I don't see how we could ask, I mean, all the money comes from the citizens to pay these people for, invest in 3 or 5 years for the next 20 or 30. So we do need to kind of, a minimum of 15 or 20 years if taxpayers are going to pay benefits for another 15 or 20 years after.
Very good point.
Yeah, they really needs to be more like a 20+ year to be. I mean, it's loyalty, dedication,
Yeah.
and they earn it. Not just come here for a pit stop to get a better program because it's better than one in other cities.
And our focus literally was to get us to where we are on solving the pension issue. And now, with your permission, I'd like to make this our focus financially, that we can get you a good solution.
Well, and if we stay competitive in the region, then that kind of washes itself out.
Right.
Well, and it's one of those things that you tend to forget about. It's like an old suit hanging up in the closet. Gee, I didn't know I had this. You forget about the fact that this person looks young now, in the 20s. Don't have to worry about what we're going to pay and benefits after they retire some 25 years out, but we really do because it shows up on our balance sheet. So,
Before you leave that, when was the last time or have we ever reviewed the criteria on our OPEB plan?
I don't know. I really don't know.
That's probably what we've had in place from day one and nobody's ever addressed it.
And so we do have an actuarial study that's done every 2 years, and that's the recommended thing by GASB. GASB says if you've got less than 200 employees, you can do it every 3 years, but we got more than 200 employees, we got 10 times that. And so we probably ought to do another side-by-side actuarial study, just like we did on the pitch and bond, to make sure that everybody's coming up with the same conclusion. But getting back to the trip, it was a good trip, and both the mayor and Carol, I invite them to
And
the...
Patrick,
and
yeah, no,
Patrick.
I concur wholeheartedly. I thought it was a very good trip. We got some very good communication from the agencies, and again, it does us well when you're able to confront and present the issue and then reference back to, we brought them here about 2 years ago and did a wind shear tour. Patrick was the star of that as well. He did an outstanding job as we drove them around through Portsmouth, through Jeffrey Wilson, IC Norcom, all of those sites, told them what we were going to do. And then the fact that we brought them back 2 years later and actually showed them some of those things under construction. And then we went up in November and talked to them about a lot of those things, and we just reaffirmed a lot of that when we went up last week. So, and the consistency that they had, I think they only had one of the credit rating folks that weren't there the last time, and then one young lady from Moody's is getting ready to leave and go to MIT. But they pretty much understood where we were and the roadmap that we kind of laid out, and to be able to reiterate those things. And to start off the conversation, we told you we'd look at the pension in November, and we're back here with a suggested plan.
Now,
100%. I agree. It was great.
the week before, we had put out an RFP for underwriters. Underwriters are the people who initially buy the bonds and then sell the bonds. We interviewed 4, the best of the lot and all 4 could do the job. They validated what we were doing. These are the people who, if we sell $175 million worth of bonds, and that day they have buyers for 150 of it, they step up and take the rest of it. So it's important for them to understand the issue and the risk. We chose Citibank, and the feedback, and not only Citi, and the feedback we got from all 4 when we were asking them what type of rates, I feel like I'm going to jinx it, could we look for with a callable issue? A call is when you can call the bonds in, and you might wonder, well, why would you want to do that with interest rates so low? Because just like on your home mortgage, the greatest amount of your interest is back-ended, and when you're 10 years out from a 24-year issue, it may make sense to refund that's remaining. They're giving us numbers that are below 4%. So 4% just helps all the numbers that you studied and looked at. Remember, we used 4.5. And then with 4.5, we had a hurdle rate of roughly, when you blended the two, 6.1, which meant that we had to earn 6.1 to consistently stay at 80%. And so if we come down 50 basis points, and I'm being conservative, that brings the hurdle rate down. That brings the amount of money the debt's going to cost us, the debt service, down. And all these, that's good, and that's important for us to be on the conservative side when we do our numbers like this, so that we can be surprised in the right way come the first week in June when we go to the market. And, the market could go crazy between now and June and make me into, I wish I never said this, but we're working hard to get to the market. We hope to have our bond ratings as early as the 17th from 1, certainly within the next 5 days after the 17th. So we're looking to sell these bonds the 1st of June.
Very good. Patrick, you want to add anything?
No, sorry.
Okay.
I think you did well.
Yep, you guys, we all did a great job. I thought it went well, and I think the selling point was, who was the gentleman that we hired to do the stress test? What was his name?
David Boomersheim.
Boomersheim. I think he actually showed them on all of the different scenarios that he ran and the what ifs and all, and you could just see them sitting there watching, nodding, and so I think he was a very good hire. He was an independent that went out on his own about 5 or 6 years ago, and this is all he does is do the what ifs. If this thing goes
Twist another way.
south, how would it hurt us or not hurt us? And you could see he kind of closed the loop after we all talked with putting them in a comfort zone that they were.
I had asked our team, put as much stress on this as possible. Make it the worst case. Let's assume that the day after we issue the bonds, the market just drops and we have a drop of 25% in value or 40%. What does that do to where we are? And all those numbers came out. We explained all that to all 3 agencies.
Okay.
I told you when I presented the budget that we were recommending that you appropriate the school budget by classifications. It's the term that's used in the state code, but the term that we use in the vernacular is by category. And you got an ordinance that went out on Friday, and that ordinance was a placeholder. David and Mira are here tonight. They needed to go to the school board Thursday night to run the distribution of the funds amongst the categories before they could release it, and they did that Thursday night. And so Friday morning, we got the information, and Friday afternoon, midday, I'm sitting across from the mayor at Gate 3 at the LaGuardia Airport, and we're working on the numbers. George is in the conversation, Carol's in the conversation, Rod's in the conversation. I'm copying Mira and David, and the punchline is that it was obvious that we needed to get in the same room and have a face-to-face discussion, which we did this morning. And so the one-page ordinance that you have before you will be the substitution for the ordinance that went out Friday. Everybody's comfortable with the numbers here. And the ordinance is made up of 2 sections, or 2 sets of numbers. The classifications are the categories that you see at the top, and then the other funds that you see at the bottom, such as the textbook fund and the food services fund. Now, there are 2 that I want to identify, and that's the school construction fund. And would it be okay with you guys if I asked David to come to the table if he's willing?
Sure.
He's doing this so slowly. Thanks, David. David and I had a discussion last week that he would like to see the fund get zeroed out, and going forward, all the capital projects be in the city's CIP. And that was a goal that we initiated with this budget too. And so there are 2 projects that are underway, and that is a project at Norcom and a project at Churchland Primary that total $1.8 million. These are projects that one's a roof and one is structure and a roof. But these projects are underway, there are invoices coming in, and what Mira has recommended is that that remain on their ledger until the projects are completed, which should happen by the end of this calendar year, by December. Okay, so that's what the 1.8 is. The 1.2, though, are two pending projects that work has not started on. And that is asbestos abatement at Olive Branch and the additional bays necessary for us to undertake the the school fleet maintenance. And because these projects have not started, those funds then would come over to the city side. So that explains, and next year you wouldn't see construction at all in this appropriation ordinance if what we're doing works out. All the construction will be in the city's CIP. Now, the next ordinance that you have should be an amended CIP ordinance because of what we've added here. And so if you would open, it's a two-pager, and it starts off at the top by saying an ordinance approving the FY 2014-2018 Capital Improvements Program.
It's on the back.
It's on the back. Okay, front and back. Now, we've added to next year's CIP, look under education, you'll see the garage bays improvements.
Right.
Okay, that's to construct the bays necessary for the school fleet maintenance. And we added the asbestos abatement at the Olive Branch School. Now, the schools will do the specs for that project. They'll handle taking the bids. We'll pay the invoices as they come in. But this is the way it will operate going forward. The next year, school construction will be in your CIP. Am I making sense?
Mhm, when it takes place.
So this ordinance, yes, ma'am.
I'm with you on the 600 and the 600. What's the 1,560?
Okay, remember that was already in the plan. That's made up of the school buses and the debt service for the Salmonsdale School.
Thank you.
Okay, that was already in the plan that was first proposed. That's a good question. I should have identified that. And so this will substitute the ordinance that's the CIP ordinance that was sent out in your package. All right? Now, the last ordinance I want to cover is your appropriations ordinance for the rest of the budget. And that's that long document that typically you see. And the reason why we separated out the schools from this, because this is the first time that we were doing it, and we wanted to get it right, and we wanted to make sure that it was transparent, that it wasn't buried someplace in page 4 of this multi-page document. And so, as you come down the front page of that ordinance, you'll see the transfer to the Portsmouth Public School System. That's the amount of local funds that you're providing to the school budget. And the school budget, just like our budget, is made up of a lot of funding sources. They've got federal funds coming in, they've got state funds coming in, they've got local funds coming in, they've got some self-generated funds. And that all those funds are reflected in the school budget that we've already covered. So we've given you 3 substitutes for the placeholders. The first is the school budget, the second is the CIP, and the third is this operating budget.
Now, John, where are we on the additional teachers and the additional age that we were supposed to have been looking to? That's addition to this 46 million.
You've got to decide how.
Where is that at?
it's not there. I mean, it's not in this ordinance. If you add any money to the schools, you add it at the line that is at $46 million on this multi-page.
Understand, that was $2.3 million for the 18 teachers and the 33 paras that we wanted to add.
Now,
Add to that.
if you make a change there, then you gotta come over to your school ordinance and make a change on the school ordinance. Because that money will then go into one of the categories. And most likely would be in the instruction category.
Right, it would all be in instruction.
Yeah. See what
I
it
believe
is.
the way we left it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you're gonna come back and see if we could find that
And-
money and.
Yeah, and I sent you a memo on that. If you recall, it was.
Might want to make that a public,
Be glad to.
Memo.
Remember, we just reiterated.
Yeah.
Ross. You know what, yeah, will you make enough copies to pass out to everybody? And it's in my other budget book that's on my table. Oh, it's not, it's right here before my eyeballs. I got it. Greg, can you catch up with her or somebody?
Transfer.
This is the memo that was dated April 24th. We met on April 22nd, and we told you what, it broke it out. If you wanted to fund the aides, the teachers, or both, and then how you could fund it. Copies for everybody.
just,
And Fred, while you're at it, copies for this too.
Got memos on memos on memos.
But that's how it works, Mr. Mayor, is that if you add more money to the school transfer, then it's got to be reflected in the ordinance that appropriates the funds by category.
well, I guess the question
The ordinance.
for us, and I know it was covered in memo, but so the public and the audience will know, are we gonna be able to do that or not?
You could, if you want to maintain the current level of service, and and if you want to not change your bottom line, you can do it by not providing any salary increases. You get there with that alternative. If you want to maintain the current level of services and you want to keep those salary in there, you can do it by considering a tax increase. But if you have a tax increase, then you got to have a public hearing, because you are changing the rate that you had your original public hearing on. If you want to keep your budget like it is and add 2.3, you could consider using the fund balance. One of the things that we emphasize to them is, we're bringing our use of the fund balance down with the goal of having nothing for reoccurring expenses. We explained that we cut it in half. We cut the amount that we're relying to balance the general fund by half.
So you didn't look at any other scenarios to make up the 2.3? I mean, so you're saying the only scenario is to raise taxes, fund balance, or not give the employees a raise?
Any rate.
Remember my memo? My memo showed you the general fund, and it broke it down into those slices of the pie that are immune in the general fund. Debt service is immune. Contracted services are, for the most part, immune, because that's the services that you have, like with the regional jail. You're obligated to pay that per diem cost. The schools itself is immune because you want to give more money to it. And so that, all those immune slices add up to about 38% of the pie. And you don't have much of the pie left to look at. And the message to me was, we want to maintain the existing level of service. There's not enough at the margins to snip at in order to come up with 2.3. Yes, sir.
What did the bond rating say when you told them went into the general fund? You cut into that.
When bring the they like that, and they would prefer that we not use any fund balance. In fact, we had to explain why we're using fund balance for the capital fund, and once for capital projects. And once we told them that these were one-time projects and small projects, and projects that heretofore were debt financed, where the term of the debt was greater than the life of the facility. In fact, I used that metaphor about, would you get a 20-year car loan for a car? No, because the car is not going to last that long. And in the past, we've been taking small projects whose life was not equal to the life of the debt and debt financing that. And that's not good policy. So once they understood that with a capital project, if you do a one-time standalone capital project this year, you don't have to do it next year. It's not basic.
Reoccurring.
Yeah.
It's never a good policy to do that, but unfortunately, we've been doing it and having to do it to be able to make ends meet for the last several years,
To balance it out.
to balance it out.
That's right.
So it always makes you look better when you're not dipping into your surplus for reoccurring expenses. You want to walk us through this one, John? Does everybody got a copy of this, or we can?
Yes, sir. As soon as, yeah, sure. You ask, what would it take to either fund the teaching assistants at 960, or 18 additional teachers at 1.3, or all for 3 rounded? And then I make reference to the pie, which is the last page. And unfortunately, this did not get copied in color, but it's pretty self-explanatory. That the biggest portion of the pie in our general fund are salary and benefits at 41%. When you take out schools, which is a slice of the pie that's immune, you take out debt service, and then you take out contractual services, you're taking almost 40%, another 40% out of the pie. And so that doesn't leave you much at the margins to snip at to come up with the 2.3.
It's only
And so
salaries.
the biggest slice you got is salaries and benefits.
You trading salaries for salaries is what it amounts to.
Exactly.
Question, what does the 5% other in the pie represent?
Okay. The 5% other,
It's probably miscellaneous, like office supplies, small expenditures that really don't, amount to enough to categorize on their own.
Exactly how much does it amount to?
we'll give you that number in a second.
Yeah, we can do that one.
5% of 164.
That's that
31.
5%. Miscellaneous.
It's 11.6 million. We can get you the breakout of what's in there.
11.6 million?
So your total general fund budget is 231,385,811.
Let's see.
About 11.6.
Is this on page 6-4? Would that be the 5%? It's 11.1. Is that it? expenditure category,
I'm sorry, which page are you looking at?
6.4.
What page is that?
No, the other would include operating supplies that the departments need in order to do their job. It would include expenses for small capital equipment like desks, printers, other furniture. It's if you look at the line item detail of the budget in the back of the document, you can see the things. It would include the training and travel that's necessary.
Page number.
I'm just looking at. I just happened to open to page 23 on the line item detail for the general fund. Looking at mosquito control, you can see that the supplies for their chemicals would be part of that other, because that's not under these categories. Supplies for office and printing, dues and memberships would be part of that, training. So it's a lot of small expenditures that on their own don't amount to a significant enough piece of the pie, but it's expenditures that are necessary to support the departments in accomplishing the mission.
Would it,
What is $11 million?
Correct.
11 and a half?
Roughly, yeah.
mosquito control, engineering, is that the
All the operating
traffic
departments.
engineering, property management?
So we include books and publications. And if you look through these line items, the
Where we
ones
at?
that don't
Page are
say
you on?
23.
23, if you look at 24 and you look at traffic engineering, would be their, all of the supplies, the traffic material for the signs, signals, dues and memberships.
All that comes in.
We didn't break out the, we did break out the utilities. So, I mean, but you can see the kinds of supplies and office expenses that would make up that 5%. On page 21 for fire, rescue and emergency, that would include those accounts at the bottom, the supplies, beds and bedding, medical, custodial. On the next page, supplies, office and printing, protective equipment, non-capital furniture.
Well, I believe when the superintendent last met with us, we asked him directly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Stuckwish, if you had your choice, what would you have? And I think you said the 18 additional teachers. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. I asked him that question. Yes, sir.
And I would think out of $11.5 million budget, if we could, with the exception of mosquito control, which is certainly not that's a necessity, because that's certainly a health risk. I would think that we could find the $1.3 million. So that would, me speaking as me, I would task staff to come back, how you're going to come up with the 1.3 out of that 11.5 million.
Well, me speaking as me, they need to go find the 2.3 million for both of them. Yes, sir.
The reason I asked about the 5% is because if it totals to 11.6, it seems as though somehow we ought to be able to squeeze the money for both, for the paras and for the teachers that are needed, some kind of way or another. That's a big sum for 5% for others.
Well, I look at the teachers as a necessity. I don't know about the paralegals.
The paras are a necessity.
They had para too.
From some's point of view, others, they make life easier for the classroom.
Not easy.
You've been in there with those kindergartners, 25 of them, Bill Moody.
Walk in my shoes
with
and
no
tell
help.
me
I
what
know
to
what our
do.
average class size is according to the Virginia State Superintendent's stats. It's one of the lowest in the region. So unless we say that those figures are incorrect, I stand by what the state superintendent report says.
I think I kind of look more at the the reality of where we are in our own schools in light of what we need there. It's apparent that we need paras in those lower grades and that we need teachers in those areas where we need help to help maintain the kids being able to pass.
Sorry.
Y'all just
So we didn't look at,
overtalked what I was trying to say,
Well, that's, obviously, we have a difference of opinion. What are we going to task management to look for?
Mr. Mayor, yeah.
Hold on.
Okay.
Ms. Randall.
I would just like to say, sometimes we speak from knowledge we have experienced as a result of working in a setting. It's easy to look over and anticipate or project what you're going to need to do something, but you need to walk in the shoes of the individuals who are out there on the job, working every day, and for so long we have been shortchanged. And I'm going to speak for it because that was why I came on council, because I was concerned about what was happening to our children who's going to be the future generation. And I will push for it. We still have not gotten what we needed, and yet I'm a taxpayer like everybody else is. But I also recognize the need that we need to make sure we have competent, proficient individuals that are coming through our schools as adults to carry on, to make things better for whatever the next generation might be. I am not in favor of pushing or cutting for education because that is our future. Without them going out and being the future leaders for tomorrow, there is no future. And that's how strongly I feel about it. Okay. And I have walked in the shoes where we worked without nothing. And we still produce quality leaders. As I look around in this room, I see some of the products that came through, and we worked with nothing. So when we're talking about cutting what's going to develop the minds of the leaders for tomorrow, I'm concerned. As if it's just like cutting a piece of a pie and eating it. I can't buy that. And you can't tell me what it's like to walk in my shoes unless you walked in my shoes. And I'm a taxpayer too, who's been putting money out here. And that I cannot buy.
Okay.
I came here to fight for education.
So, John, the opportunities or the potential opportunities for cuts to be able to get this $2.3 million or going back to your pie are where? And
It's in the salary and benefits, and then on the margins, like other.
so where does all of these increases, like, I think you mentioned earlier about some of our other departments, constitutional departments want new software, new programming, 600 here, 700 there. Where does all that fit?
The software is in the CIP, it's not in the operating budget.
Okay.
And because of the confusion that was going around, the second memo you got,
That the one Fred just passed out?
right, and that explains how my recommendation was developed. It wasn't just pulling numbers out of a hat. It's going back and looking at the school CAFRs for several years, taking out the non-operating expenditures, which we all agree are there, and that's not throwing rocks at anybody. Then coming up with what does it take to operate the school system,
There you go.
and then plussing it up for inflation and for the governor's 2%, and that's how we came at the $46 million. And it takes into account some cost savings that the schools should consider. It's their decision, not yours, not mine, but there are ways to save money. We're working hard to help them save $100,000 on the school maintenance. That's a real saving. and then $1.7 million in capital funds because they had planned to build a standalone garage. So we're working hard to bring about efficiencies.
Where are we with the self-insured piece? That number there is 1.6 million?
Yes, sir.
Right.
But again, that's their decision, not yours.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's a way for them to save money and put that money into instructions.
Yes, ma'am.
I am not an educator. I know nothing about running a school, first one to tell you. But I know how to read a balance sheet and read the reports. I am pleased with the manager's recommendation because I like the way the numbers were arrived at. It's what was really spent, it's what was really used, it's what the school system decided was appropriate to use, plus inflation going forward. Now, Dr. Stuckwich comes back after all this has been done and says, now I need some new teachers and/or some new paras. Okay, he knows how to run a school. I don't.
There you go.
This is new information, new stuff. All I can go by is, what I learn about how many teachers we have per pupil, how many administrators we have, which seems high to me. I don't mind meeting them halfway, but if I would like to see the school board come back and say, we'll look at this healthcare situation. That's a way to save money. When it all comes down to it, it's all the taxpayers' money. It's not our money and their money. And if we could form some agreement that they'll actually look at this healthcare situation, which will almost pay for that, I would even break my own rule to myself, which is go into the fund balance for a part of this, but only if they would do that. I think that's fair. I think that's meeting us. I don't want to. I'm not going to raise taxes, and I'm not going to take salary benefits away from city employees to just move it over to the other side. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
To your point, when we had discussion, so I brought up the paraprofessional last time, and Dr. Stuckwich interjected that teachers were his main goal.
That's right.
And so at that time, I said we should look into getting the teachers for him.
Thank you.
How long would it take to realize if they were to self-insure the $1.6 million?
According to the study, they would have those savings in 1 year. And the health year goes for a calendar year. So if they were to go self-insured next year, it would start in January 1. That's when it makes sense. And so they would get half of that, which would be $800,000.
So if we see it as Ms. Simmons is suggesting, went into the fund balance for 1.3, and they would realize, you said 8. And so you'd be right there with the 2.3 minus a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's correct.
So that's the way to get there. That's the way to get to
there.
2.3.
All right.
Dr. Stuckwich.
Not that I want to get into the council's discussion on priorities, but I want to clarify something on the health insurance. The figure that you've got, that 1.7, does not have stop-loss insurance in it. That needs to be in there. That's almost $1 million.
I'm sorry, does not have what?
Stop-loss insurance that you have to have in there. When you put the stop-loss in there, the Mercer study and our Wells Fargo studies are almost identical, which says you can save $1 million in a year. You can save, but you can also lose $2 million the same year, depending on your experience. You gotta look at this thing with your eyes open. That's why self-insurance is not always the best way to go. You can lose, you can win on self-insurance because you're taking on a risk. I think everybody can understand that. But see, that's what Mercer doesn't address. They only address the upside in the report you got. Our Wells Fargo insurance
The upside looks just like Mercer's insurance because we've got the stop loss figured in. Mercer does not figure in the stop loss insurance, which you have to have. Wells
that's an
Fargo
extra $1
addresses
million.
the possibility of losing if you have, if your experience is not that good. Mercer does not address the idea that you could lose in a given year. That's all I want to say. You got to be careful on how you interpret that. We are looking at self-insurance. Don't get me wrong. We're looking at self-insurance. The board is we had a long discussion of that last Thursday about self-insurance. And we put both studies side by side, and they basically say the same thing. It's just you got to make sure that you got all the pieces in both studies. And Mercer, the big pieces, it says right in there, stop loss is not in here. If you look at our Wells Fargo study, they have a stop loss figure in there, which is, I think, $890,000.
But stop loss does, it takes out your big losses, and that washes, because they looked at 2 years' worth of claims, and they're not just little small claims, it's the big claims too. And so that's why you have stop loss insurance, is to cover those big losses, those things that cost $100,000, $200,000, $250 a pop. And so, yeah, it says up front it's not included, but the insurance assumption is that when you get stop loss, it washes out the big claims.
great big claim.
And so it's a net gain of 1.6 thereabouts. I mean, you'll actually know once you implement. But again, we've been doing this for 3 decades.
That's right.
There are not many organizations, public or private, that have more than 1,000 employees that are not self-insured. I mean, it is really simple math. I mean, it's not mysterious. What you do with self-insured is that you're paying the profit because you're buying it from a for-profit company, and often a stock company. Then they cover they're not going to assume all the risk. They're going to bill risk, the cost of that risk, into your policy. Just like if you have car insurance and you have a fender bender, you might get a increase in your premium because the risk is going up. And they're not going to assume that, they being an insurance company. So that's a good point, but when you have stop loss, it takes out the 4 or 5 or 6 big cases that you have that can add up very quickly to $1 million.
But would my scenario work itself out in the wash after about a year or 18 months or so?
It can.
It can.
In the Mercer report that Dr. Stubbs referred to, on page 6, it talks about, it says, no stop loss insurance has been considered, as he said, but we recommend purchasing coverage at $20,000 or higher. So, unless we had, when we started this budget year, we had some priorities. Schools are always in the top of the priority list. Okay, our employees, both current and past, to give them a raise for not having one going on 5 years now, as well as retirees, and fixing the pension for those who we owe it to, who served us 20 to 30 years. We asked the manager to do that, all that, without raising taxes.
No,
Okay,
piece of ice. I don't have a cold, but
that makes sense. And so,
Only he's over here dying, that's all.
the piece of ice went down the wrong.
He's having some problems.
well, he's between the one two people who might give him out the mouth. Don't know So get back to the point. And so we got a budget that does that. Didn't quite do that. Then we came, and like I said, other stuff which is asked for additional.
This was after the fact.
Additional teachers, and I don't have a problem with additional teachers. I'm even willing to go to fund balance to get that 1.3 for the additional teachers. If we could find a way to get because he said that was his priority, and I'm willing to give him his priority and make sure so he has his priority. That's where he needs most of his teachers in the classroom. So we can see a way of doing that. And even if you added $250,000 in there, it would add less than that extra $300,000 to that to buy the stop loss.
I want to know they're going to help us find the money.
I don't, I agree with the 1.3 million for the teachers, but I think we can look in that other 5%, $11.5 million, excluding the, I don't want to touch the mosquito control, but I'd rather see us try to find it there first before we go to the fund balance. You guys just went up to, and girls just went up to New York and listened to the rating agencies. They go nuts when you dip into the fund balance, as the mayor just said, for reoccurring expenses. So I'd rather see us, we're telling the school folks to tighten up, go find something. We need to get off our duffs and get in, not that y'all haven't been working hard, I don't mean that, but look into this other 5% that, as I heard you, was furniture, office supplies. Bottom line is $5.5 million, so what are you talking for 1.3 million, was that 11% or so? I'd like for you to come back to us, and then if there's a difference, a couple $100,000, don't mind going in fund balance for that, but not for 1.3 million, knowing that it's going to be reoccurring.
And like that, Mr. Moody, we vote on the budget tomorrow, right?
Right.
Okay. So we got
Supposedly.
so you got about 24 hours to figure this out. We got an accrual period coming up here soon, right? Accrual period coming up soon.
Accrual period?
Yeah, after June 30th. And
Wait,
Yeah.
We could amend.
you see where I'm going here?
Yeah, we can amend it.
So if we were to take the 1.3 out of the fund balance, at
Right.
the end of the accrual period, there was, 2.3 million or whatever it is. We could then replace that and still look and still have time to look in this 5% or wherever to find those funds.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, in other words, we got some time to do that. You agree with that, Mr.
Well-
Manager?
the best situation to be in at the end of the year is to be over on your estimates and revenues and under on your expenditures. We gave a forecast to the bond rating agencies where we think that we'll be come June 30th. And Carol, can you do this from your memory?
How much we thought we'd be,
Yeah.
approximately 11.6 million over our 15% policy.
No. How we're going to end up
We're gonna do that.
net between revenues and expenditures on the operating budget?
Yes, right now, we think revenues will come in slightly under, maybe about 600,000 under budget, and that expenditures are probably going to be about 1% under budget.
So there's going to be a net, and that's what you're talking
Right.
about. There's going to be a net, I don't want to call it surplus, but we will end up with money at the end of the year that we have not spent.
That's the money I'm talking about.
That's what we're working at.
And my point is, if that
That's
Sir.
money left over, but that's not a surplus.
It goes to the fund balance.
Well, that's what I was saying. I was using this as sort of a lending program until we could realize the savings from health insurance. That's
During the same way. I mean,
That's kind of what I was
we'll tell you
trying to
that
do.
he's probably sitting on
Same
about $1
thing.
million worth of
but at least we'd have that money if we want to get that for the rating agencies and get that fund balance back up to that
Where it is.
where it was. We could
That's right.
use that money.
It's not like we're writing a check for this in June.
Right.
That's right.
It's many months, and this would have to be applied categorically, so it went to instruction.
Yes.
We can't build a gym with this money for 18
But you
teachers.
But that's where to get them to teachers tomorrow.
A man. Mind of a child.
Tomorrow, and we still have this 1 point. I don't know how much that comes to, but
Yeah.
Well, I think we miss sometime the criticality of what's being asked here. We see how we can possibly get the money, but we're putting a Band-Aid on a fix that needs some stitching to it, in my opinion. I can see us saying, well, let's do one, but when we need both of them, I am somewhat in the educational mindset, and I see the necessity of having paras in those early grade periods and teachers in those crucial areas. You need them both to really make it work. And if our school system is going to remain sound as we want it to be, then we have to look at ways, if we're going to do half of it, let's do all of it, the teachers and the parents. That's my opinion.
Dr. Stuckman, let me ask you, you and your board met the other night, did you discuss the whole self-insured piece and going and what those savings might be? Is there any validity to that, or can you talk anything about what possible you may have out of this savings if you did do the stop-loss piece?
Well, our policy, our current policy ends in December, the end of the year, so we're only dealing with 6 months in the calendar year that's coming up, the budget year we're talking about, 13, 14. So any change in health insurance only come into play for half of that year. Obviously, the following year it'll be the full year. From what we're reading in it, and Mira's, correct me if I'm wrong, what we're reading in it is that we could save as much as $1 million in a year. So about $500,000 in the coming year if things go well and experience doesn't go south on us. If experience goes south on us, we could lose as much as $1 million because we're dividing by 2. So we could gain $500,000, we could lose $1 million. We're looking positively at going in that direction, but I cannot speak for the board. No decision was made Thursday night, but we had a thorough discussion of it.
And what about the combining of like purchasing and finance and some of these other departments?
There's money to be saved.
Save.
But we're not there yet.
No, ma'am.
No.
That's can't be done overnight.
That's right. Takes time.
Are we still talking about it?
That would take
Be
time.
in the same room?
There is some low-hanging fruit. I mean, purchasing can be done. Payroll, we've got to migrate to Munis because we're not on Munis. And I've already started working to get us there.
But the school system is.
But the school system
Yeah, they
is. And let me say this. I think Paige is probably got the best alternative. I'd rather you see it, and I thought I'd never say this. I'd rather
Did you agree with me?
I agree with you.
Go ahead, Dave.
What I'm about to say,
Go ahead, John.
I'd rather you take it out of fund balance because you take public safety. Think about how large a chunk public safety is of our general fund. When we talk about supplies, we're talking about bullets, protective gear, upgrading the required ISO equipment for the fire department. I mean, this is real stuff. It's not just frills.
Have we gone from desk and paper to
Well, that was it.
now to bullets and
Well, it's still
firefighting
supplies.
equipment? I think that category needs to be defined. We're putting it on the school system. Hey, folks, come back, tighten your belts. Now we talking about $11.5 million. All of a sudden, it's become bullets and vests and stuff.
There's no comparison.
That no council would ever consider cutting.
That's right.
Fire equipment. What happened to the paper, the new desk, and the new laptops? And
We're
all
a victim
that.
of how we described it. I'm sorry to say. I mean, you ask us what makes up that stuff, and the first thing that came out of the mouth was desk.
Let's define it.
Be glad to. I mean, we told you we'll give you a breakdown of that. But, you got to remember, too, that 5% other has been cut. It hasn't grown. You've been cutting your budget. It's not like you've been letting your belt out. You've been tightening your belt.
I think that's the same argument that our schools are making, is they have cut all of these positions over the last 7 or 8 years, somewhere in the tune of, is it 400? Somewhere up in 300 to 400 positions, and eliminated those teachers' aides, and then we come and say, based on their last year's expenses, we took those numbers and did some other things and come up with 46. I applaud what you're saying there, but you did that after they did all of that belt tightening too. So if we're going to use that logic on our end, we need to use it on both sides. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, just add this, that the city is funding us right now with the recommended budget was $6 million less than we were funded with this year. So there's $6 million somewhere, because we're not getting it from city
last
revenue.
year. You didn't spend it last year. You put it in OPEB. That's not a good argument.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. The other thing, the state superintendent's report said, and I hear about you cutting paralegals and even teachers. But according to the state superintendent, our ratio of administrators to students is the highest in the state. So what's being done with that?
There's a fair amount of flexibility on those reports. What one division calls some things, what another division calls things can vary. Those are not absolute. If you look at the cost per student, I think there's, and this is the information was distributed by the city manager, there are only 2 school divisions with lower cost per student than we are. That's the real deal. That's all the expenditures out there complete, all your expenditures divided by your number of students. That's one is one that you can't fudge on or have any flexibility on how you define things. That's your total budget. Back out your capital projects and your debt service, divide it by the students. There's only two in that example that were below us. Everybody else was above us.
So we're not top-heavy in
No.
administrators?
It's how you count people. Some people call this person administrator, somebody else will call them a teacher. There's a lot of flexibility there, Mr. Moody. I'm just saying that report is not as hard and fast and as easy to compare back and forth as one thing. The one figure that is important is cost per student. That's one that you can't change that so much. That's pretty solid. And there are only 2 below us. I think it was Suffolk and Hampton. Everybody else was above us.
Cost per student.
Per student.
And we have fairly high Title I costs here because of at-risk students. And we're still below some of those others that have much less lower percentage of at-risk students than we do. We have mandatory class sizes in K-3 because of at-risk students. There's a lot of things that go into that formula. You just can't grab numbers and throw them out there out of context and compare them. I think we're owed at least an explanation on those things, which I haven't been given this budget year in many cases. I've been blindsided.
Step us through, Mr. Manager, if you would, on the 1.3. How would we need to address that?
Okay. Can I back the train up a little bit? Sure. I think the first step would be for you all to have a consensus on how much additional money you want to give the schools. Is it $1 million? Is it 1.3? Or is it 2.3? I'm not sure that I've heard, what
We need to give you a consensus.
Yeah. And then whatever that number is, then you can decide what makes up that number. What is the funding source for that number? Elizabeth has said implementing cost savings would be one way, and that would cover about $1 million, and that gets you to the 1.3 that you're talking about. Then at the 1.3, again, you can look at either cutting the operating budget in the margin again, others, what you've talked about, but that's unfortunately for this discussion, we blurted desk and paper, but it's more than that. It's everything that the department needs to get the mission done. It's chemicals and mosquito control, it's protective apparatus in public safety, it's science in the traffic engineering department, and we categorized it just really poorly, and I'm sorry for that. But there's not, 11.5 million is a lot of money. But on your general fund operation, what you do is really important stuff. It's not a lot of money. We anticipate that we'll be in a positive position at the end of the year. In other words, we'll add to fund balance. Vice Mayor Cherry has suggested that we take advantage of that fund balance. We got 6 weeks before the end of the year. I recommended to council, sir?
Of that surplus?
Yeah, I would recommend, if it is the consensus to go the 2.3, that you do exactly what Elizabeth has suggested, which is ask the schools to look internally to come up with the savings, and you take 1.3 out of the fund balance.
Which could be
What they would
replaced come June.
Do we have any money coming back from the school from their?
We anticipate $3.4 million in this budget coming back from the schools. And that
At the
was
end of the year.
an estimate that was made from our discussions when we were putting the budget together. I don't know how much money that,
Is that factored in this budget?
yes, sir.
Yes,
It's
it
already in
is.
here.
So that's not found money?
No,
It's
not
already
found.
there.
But they're not limited to one, I mean, that's an estimate that was made 2 months ago.
Well, I support doing what the superintendent requested on his priority list, and that's the 1.3 for the 18 teachers.
I'm in favor of the 2.3 for the paras and the teachers.
Okay. Elizabeth, you were in what?
I mean, if we're gonna do it, you might as well do the 2.3.
Okay. Danny?
If you do it with the health insurance and pages
Everything in there.
surplus.
Oh, okay, that's a nebulous thing. We sit here, or
Yeah.
3 months down the road, we're talking another $1 million.
That's right.
Where's that savings? What's written down that we're gonna get that other $1 million?
I don't think there is.
What are we gonna get? What is the public gonna see, other than us coming up with another 2.3 million that we really don't have?
It's a social compact. I mean, you don't have anything more than that, other than, and I use the term incentive. I mean, if you factor in a savings, the incentive then is on the school board and the school administration side to find that savings. That's the incentive.
So they will come up with the other $1 million.
Well, that's what I would do if I was the manager of the school system. I would be incentivized to find the savings.
I guess the only thing that's going to build is history. Every year that I've been here 3, we've had a substantial surplus. So history tells us we'll probably have one again this year. So I think the money that I spoke of would be there. And I'd rather do that than just cutting, because also in the last 2 or 3 budgets, I know that the previous manager went back to the departments and the constitutional officers each of those years and asked for 10, 15%. Well, you were here for one of those years, but I'm with 10 to 15% each year to give back for us to make the budget work. I don't want to go back to them a third year, a fourth year, which third year, it's my third year, and ask them for another 10 or 15% from the department heads and the constitutional officers.
Remember the year, Mayor, just before you got here, Mayor Holly yelled at me at this table because there were no flowers on High Street,
Yeah.
and it was that last 5% cut
Yeah.
to the Parks
still
and
on.
Recreation. We didn't even know that we'd done that.
Flowers
They're
still
still
on
on
there.
there.
Well, because when you do that and you don't tell them where to cut,
Right.
right.
I end up having to go on the floor my first year and defend putting the money back for the Cavalier Manor Pool.
That's right.
It happened right before I got here. I got here in July. It happened in May. But
right.
you all didn't know that when you cut Parks and Recs 10%, that they were going to cancel the Cavalier Manor Pool. So I'm sitting there brand new, getting beat up by it, and I wasn't even here. So
That's right.
but we got it fixed. But all I'm saying is we don't need to go down that road again, because we don't have time. We won't have time tomorrow for department heads or constitutional officers, anybody to come back to and say, here's where your 10% is. If we're reasonably sure we're going to have this money at the end of the year, and I'm pretty sure we will, because history tells us that, then I think it's a safe bet that we do it that way.
Well, it just continues what we've been doing. It's spending the money from the check that's in the mail, or we hope the check is in the mail. That money's going to be there. Once again, this is reoccurring money. It's not like we're using it to build a rec center and a one-time expense.
That's next. That's
And-
next.
I was waiting for that. But, I mean, if the school system can come up with the other $1 million in savings, I'll support it.
Well,
So you at 2.3. Danny, where were you? I think we need to get them all of it. Where are you? Nothing? Just say it. Huh?
I support the budget, but you know, one thing I keep hearing is the school board comes back every year with a surplus. I guess you got to take your hat off to the school board and Dr. Stuckwich for that. Because if they got extra money every year, they either done a savings or cut somewhere. So that, Dr. Stuckwich, good job. I support the budget like it stands. And that's pretty much where
You want the whole 2.3?
I feel as if it's
I'm the whole thing. You're the whole
2.3.
thing. You're the whole thing.
The
Okay.
whole thing.
So we got a majority that want to go 2.3.
you know, you're not going to hire 48 people that you don't think you can continue to pay the year after and the year after and the year after. I mean, we're all in a social contract, to use your words here. You know, you got to do what you got to do to keep those people because you want to keep your funding. We got to keep spending the taxpayers' money wisely.
Well, two, I think you got to stop and look at who cut the paralegals.
Yeah,
We didn't cut them.
right.
We also got to look at why they were cut.
Yeah, it's
And that was
it's
because.
choices and priorities.
Right.
Might be right.
All of us are faced with.
That's right.
If we start losing accreditation of our schools, we would have set back and wish we'd done what we're
That's right.
proposing to do.
Well, the chart he gave us
So we
already
need to be
showed
proactive rather
that we're
than
starting to have some
I'm
retreat
not
in that.
certain paralegals or teachers are critical to that.
Okay.
Paralegals.
It looks like there's a
We're at
consensus.
2.3.
All right, let's
Right.
talk about how you want to fund that. You want to fund it the way that has been described by Paige and Elizabeth?
It's the Simmons-Cherry Amendment,
I think the
Cherry-Simmons Amendment.
Yeah, I like that better, Cherry.
I knew you would.
I think we need to get the money on our side to them. Again, it is not fair
That's right.
to allow them to cut all the way down and then say that's where you are. That's like me losing weight. I'm down 45, and then you want to say, okay, you've lost nothing. I need you to lose another 45. That wouldn't be fair to me. Chances are I'm going to probably gain some. So it's not fair to have them stripping down these last 4 or 5 years and now say, now you go find some more of what you're doing. And we're sitting here hiring people, giving raises, coming up with surpluses,
Giving raises.
taking people over from temporary status to permanent status, all of those things that I said I was very concerned that we're doing on our side of the house, because we just spent the last 5 years from the city making sure that we had those surpluses and we didn't overspend. And so, again, we're getting ready to gear up on this side and ask them to cut back on the other. I'm just saying, I don't think that's fair. I think we need to get the whole 2.3 and have it for them. If they go self-insured, if they can find $500,000 next year, they can't do anything with it, right?
That's right.
So if it's a plus, you give me that look. So if it's a $500,000 they gain out of doing that, then we've got that to deal with at the end of the year.
Well,
I just wouldn't want them to go looking for any further cuts.
I understand, but.
Again, that's just one opinion.
As you style your position, don't make it sound like we're being reckless, because we're not.
I didn't say reckless. That's the problem when you're getting down to cuts, when you're down to the trim, when you're doing onesies and twosies, everything is on the table, and anything you take off, someone thinks you're opposed to it, or you're calling it or describing it the wrong way. And that's because where we are in our budget and where we are with our finances. That's why I question the whole piece about adding the $700,000 in for the police and fire. I don't want to make it sound like I'm against them. We wanted to give the raise to the general wage employees. And somehow there's another $700,000 for the 2% for the police and fire. And if I say that, somebody's going to run out of here and say he's against the police and fire. But that wasn't what my goal was. And I think all of us talk general wage. So if you add all this stuff in here and keep adding somebody else because it looks good, or politically you don't want to publicly say not to do that now, this time or that time, you're going to wind up with all of this and nobody wants to cut anything. So, I mean, where do you stop with that? And then you want to, okay, you want to give the police and fire the $700,000?
Fine.
And then you want the teachers to go and cut. I just don't think that's right. I think we got to make choices.
You got the consensus. We decided to do it, but I think you're mischaracterizing. These are additional teachers that we're giving them. 18 additionals. We're not. This wasn't the conversation about cutting. This is about granting the superintendent's request for the 18.
Yeah, but I'm talking about replenishing the age that were cut out.
That's where we were, and so it's about shared sacrifice. And we're doing what we can, because we all campaign and pledge to support the school system. That's what we're doing now. So I don't want you to mischaracterize what we're doing, as if we're somehow, begrudgingly doing it. We all want to do it. We just want to find the right way to do it, the most economic way to do it, and not to blow up the budget that we got to pass tomorrow. And this is probably the best way to do it. So let's not take it out of perspective.
Okay, no, I didn't do that. If you go to the front cover letter here that the manager talks about, opening up and hiring all these people because of what we need, I'm saying we're going to do that here, but we don't want them to do that. They're just talking about those 18 teachers and the 33 pairs. And
But
we're
we
in
just
here.
said we did want them to do that.
Okay.
Well, Elizabeth said it a while ago, and I'll repeat it. If it wasn't for that $6 million contribution to OPEB last year, we wouldn't be
in
having this
mess.
conversation.
That's for sure.
So to the bishop's point, it is about choices.
It is.
And a decision, a choice was made to do that. And here you come back after you've done it, asking for $5 million. We're going to give them 2.3, but they used 6 to put in OPEB that didn't have to be put there.
Just for a point of clarification, it made us look good in New York because we got an OPEB issue, and that issue we did not bring up because it was a positive step that we're doing something in the way of OPEB. So all of this stuff, I think the superintendent started saying, you can pull numbers out and make them look any way you want them to look.
That wasn't why it was done, Mayor.
It didn't matter about why it was done, it was the fact
Because
that
they didn't trust sending the money back to the city.
That's where it all started.
That's what it was.
That's all it was.
In your canvassing of positions, it sounds like
2.3.
We should quit while we're ahead. We're at 2.3.
Right.
2.3, that's given.
Right.
All right, it sounds like to me you're at 3 members of council are for savings plus 1.3 from the fund balance. And so how do the rest of the members of council feel? You've articulated your
Said I want to get it all from our side. And see,
That was my comment. I want the 2.3. I want to get it all.
okay, and Danny,
Savings, force.
are you with them?
Go it real easy.
You were getting it?
Wait a minute, savings.
Wait, hold up.
Wait a minute,
Savings.
something's wrong.
I'm not, I don't know.
No, he's saying what you said.
Make it plain. What are we
We
saying
want
here?
we're not supposed to 2.3?
Right, we agreed to
That
that.
we agreed to
How are
the
you coming up with
2.3.
How we're going to get
The
it?
2.3 is about $1 million over the first calendar year
And then
from the school board going to
Only
self-insurance.
$500,000.
And which will
Only
be
half a
which will
million.
be only be a half, we know that.
and
That's
additional.
right.
And the additional will come from the non-surplus savings we get at the end of the fiscal year. The overage that's not a surplus.
The
The
non-surplus?
$100,000 too for that's real, in fleet maintenance.
I think
Right.
they'll find a way
Right.
to do it when they want to do something.
That would be
I'm
the
good with
Cherry
that.
Simmons amendment.
Well,
Yes,
really,
but
now,
support the school.
Hold it.
Now, I don't know how you put that in the budget.
like she's saying, when we get to that revenue line item, on the revenue side of the general fund, you increase the fund balance expenditure by 1.3. It's at roughly $1 million, all right?
Okay.
Then you add 1.3 to the school appropriation, because what you're asking them to do is don't buy this, but buy that. You're just switching dollars. Don't buy insurance, put it into teachers. Don't buy maintenance, put it into aides. And so the appropriation ordinance would increase by 1.3 on both the general fund transfer, it'd be 47.3, and the instruction side of the school budget would increase by 1.3, and the bottom line would increase by 1.3. And then we'd have to make the adjustment in the maintenance for transportation to get that up into instructions. But the bottom line budget on the schools would, to implement what the majority of council is saying, would increase by 1.3. And we would,
$500,000 if they get the savings and everything's positive up there from 1.3 doesn't give you, 2.3 gives you what,
That's why we're
1.7?
7.
it's more than just the health insurance, Mayor. It's the $100,000 for the school maintenance. And
We didn't bake that in already? You don't already have the 100,000 baked in? Carl's gonna know?
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Go back to my May 1 memo. And, again, we didn't pull these numbers out of the hat. And it's been demonstrated tonight, and everybody's said it, that the schools have had a surplus at the end of the year. And it has been used. We anticipated, with building this budget, that they would have a margin of $1.5 million. Go back to the May 1 memo. And that's not just pulling numbers out of a hat, that's going back and looking and analyze and dissecting their CAFRs. And remember what a CAFR is. A CAFR is done by management, not by the auditors. So when you look at the school CAFR, you're looking at the financial statement as prepared by management, not by the auditor. The auditor looks at the financial statement for materiality. It doesn't go in and redo the numbers. So the CAFR that you have right here, all the statements in here is prepared by management. That's stated. When the auditor comes forward and makes this presentation, that auditor tells you that. So we looked at their numbers. We looked at their numbers for the last several years. Took out the non-operating expense, busted up, and that's how we came up with the 46. And when you look at the 46 on that memo on May 1, they still have a margin of 1.5. So I think it's safe. Yeah, accuse me of not being the superintendent, I'm not. But I've been in public management for 4 decades. 4 decades. So I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I understand it, and I can analyze it, I can figure it out. And I think you're on safe grounds to go with asking the schools to come up with $1 million, and you come up with 1.3. And what I was explaining is how it's going to look in your ordinances. It'll show up in your budget as the $1.3 million additional use of fund balance, which will be on the revenue side. On your expenditure side, it'll show up as 1.3 on your school transfer. So we'll move that from 46 to 47.3. On the school budget, it will change their bottom line by 1.3, and they'll get the savings within. Gee whiz, that's a $161 million budget.
Okay, explain the 1 million they're gonna get, if it's a $500,000 for the, going to, self-insured, you said 100,000 for the maintenance and 100,000 where else?
Okay,
That's only at 7.
go back to my May 1 memo.
Okay.
All right, the spreadsheet you've got in front of you. You see that even with $46 million, there's a margin, there's a balance of unused funds of 1.5 million. And that's based on looking at there are expenditures that they reported themselves over the last 3 years, 4
From the
years,
school division.
and taking out the non-capital expenditures, like $6 or $7 million for OPEB, and all the money that's been spent on capital. When you take out those non-operating expenditures, that's how we came up with 46 million. And even with 46 million, there's cushion in that, Mr. Mayor. There's cushion in
You
that.
got a 3.9% increase off of what was spent to get to 46.
3-point increase,
3.37 right here at the bottom.
right at the bottom.
Okay, I would
fine
be
with
in
what you
favor of the amendment only if we guaranteed, once they went self-insured, that we cover whatever they can't make up if they can't get to $500,000. I think that's a gamble with that big of a swing. With if they don't do, well, you're gonna do the stopgap, right? The stop
Right.
loss. You have to do that to
You have
be
to
able
have
to
that.
cover
Gotta
your.
do that.
But in our budget, we have to budget for $1 million. Prudent budgeting, we have to budget for $1 million loss, not a $500,000 gain.
You have to
Because we
budget.
cannot afford to go over. We have to budget, if we go self-insured, for $1 million loss, not a $500,000 gain.
Why is that? Just
Because we
of the
cannot
worst
afford to
case?
overspend our budget. You have to take in those exigencies that are out there. If we lose, there's nobody to cover for us, and we can't. It's criminal. We all know that. Been through there, been there, seen it.
What the mayor
Okay?
is saying is that because this is new territory, it's a new year, let's look 11 months down the road. And let me point out one thing, and that is, you talked about periodic appropriations. The appropriation ordinance that you have tonight is my recommendation that you do it all effective 1 July. I think as we all try to get up on this learning curve, to use a metaphor, let's take baby steps to get there, okay? I think it would be really a tough load to carry to go to categories, pardon me, George, classifications, and then try to superimpose on that periodic appropriations. I think that we need to get some experience under our belt. And I think your idea is good, Mr. Mayor. Let's see how it goes. And if,
It's not like we're never going to see each other again.
No,
We're acting
we're
like
in
we're
the
not
same
going to talk
building.
again until a year from now.
so let's,
No, but I want the direction out of what our meeting is that we want both. We want to get those teachers and those aides, and we don't want them hedging.
That's right.
And whatever we
I think
come
we
up
said
with.
that 30 minutes ago.
And,
Well, to
no,
make
but they
it
need to
clear,
go with clarity,
yeah.
that that's what our intent is, and we want them to move forward with filling those 2 slots. The 18 teachers and the 33 aides. And if we're clear there with going with this amendment with that, and if they move forward with the self-insured, and if he's got to bake in worst-case scenario into what he's doing, then we need to be standing by, letting them know pretty much we're backing you. If it doesn't work, we're going to get you the money. That's what I'm saying.
We can do that.
We can do that.
We can do that.
I think so.
Do it.
I'm confused. All right, we're at 1.3 million for sure. They're gonna go and try to save some.
No, we're at 2.3.
There was
Yeah.
your point.
But we're 1.3 plus the sharing of what they raise or save, right? Is that how we're gonna get to the 2.3?
yes, sir.
Or we're-
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's it.
But we're
And
going
if they
to
go-
appropriate the
Well-
2.3. Is that what you're
That-
recommending?
No,
Appropriate the
1 million's
1.3.
already
Let me
in
talk.
your ordinance. Okay, that's there.
So you're gonna add 1.3
And
to
we're
it.
going to add 1.3.
So still, it's, he's saying 2.3 because 1 million's already there.
Yeah.
We're gonna add,
And they'll just,
1.3.
we'll switch out, we'll switch categories. of that.
it's gonna total 2.3.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah, that's all we need.
all right, fine. And you're going to fix these documents by tomorrow? Adding the,
Yes, sir.
okay.
I'll be here.
And so the 2.3 is there, is that our understanding?
Thank you, sir.
That's right.
There we go.
And again, their bottom line will increase 1.3, they'll get the other one from within the budget. Your appropriation to the schools will increase 1.3. The revenue side of our budget will increase 1.3 on the use of fund balance.
Our surplus.
Yes, sir.
Anything else, sir? You got anything?
Some of the savings that are being talked about have already been built into our budget. Right now, to just do the 2.0 that the state wants to give us, we are cutting everything in the school division other than personnel by 7%. You need to understand the reality of our budget right now. The reality is, over the last few years, we've cut positions so that as they're looking at our CAFR, they're looking at a CAFR that each year we've had to reduce positions with the anticipation that the state was going to cut our money the next year. That's why you have that residual. We explained all this last spring. There's not all this money laying around. That was one time like a windfall money each year as we were cutting our budget. We're still down $15 million from the state. We're down all those positions. If we had known and could look into a crystal ball and know what was coming in the future, that $6 million wouldn't have been there last year. We would have hired back paraprofessionals. We would have hired back teachers. But with the state cutting us each year, you can't make those commitments. That's why that 6 was like a windfall. The state is finally starting to level off. We're not getting any money much from them because we all know transportation and Medicaid are ahead of education down in Richmond. But those, you can say, well, that's what the school operated on. Yes, that's what we did operate it on. But we operated with a lot less than what we've ever had before. That's not a true picture of what we need to operate on. And we cannot go back and start refilling positions and start trying to build back without some help from somebody. It should come from the state, because that's where most of it was taken from. But without the state helping us, if we're going to improve it all, we have to ask the city to try to help us. I appreciate the 1.3. I thank City Council for that, to allow us to build back, at least starting to build back 18 teaching positions. I can't say right now that I can build back the paraprofessionals, the teaching assistants for $1 million, not knowing whether my budget's going to have $1 million in it to do that with. Because remember, that's an upfront commitment I have to make. When we put those contracts out, we owe $1 million at the beginning of the school year.
We're saying make them. We're saying make the commitment. We're going to cover it. If once you go uninsured, you go self-insured, and then we don't realize those savings, we'll get it. We're saying we want you to do both now. We want you to make those commitments because we want the paras there.
That's what the mayor's point was, that we all just agreed to, that
Right.
if it doesn't materialize, we're gonna cover it. So
Yeah.
there's no reason.
Right. Go get them both.
That's
Go
your
get the
understanding?
contracts now.
Go get them.
Yeah, that's what you said.
But just one clarification. So when you anticipate the cut coming from the state, you have to, on the front end, cut your positions to meet that.
That's right.
So you did that prior to, which is why you're saying you have this extra money. We're all blaming you for it now. If you wouldn't have had that, then you would have been over.
What's interesting, if you look at big figures, the actual money that was spent on capital projects after you take out the fund transfers, which were all thrown in, which shouldn't have been thrown in, encumbrances, which were thrown in, which shouldn't have been thrown in, it's around, over that 5-year period, about $20 million. You look at our budget, what's it been cut over that time? About $20 million. That's the money. And it's not there anymore. We can't operate the school system the way we did 5 years ago because the money isn't there. If we're going to build back, we need more revenue, continuous revenue, to build back. Without it, we don't build back. I mean, that's just where I am. I've got to balance my budget.
I got you.
Thank you.
And the city council cannot build back our budget the way it was. It's, the most,
right.
it's the state. I don't expect city council to build our budget back.
Are you
I
carrying
just
that
need some
message
help.
to our delegation? As a school board, are you meeting with our delegation, Richmond delegation?
As a general rule, our delegates are some of the most pro-education in the General Assembly, and they are working for us as a general rule.
Okay. All right, but please, do both. We want to do both.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Man, that was easy. Okay.
We will make the changes, which will be easy to do tomorrow morning, and email the changes. And we'll get a copy to you prior to the meeting.
Okay.
All right, let's discuss this whole recreational piece, because again, we talked about this 2 years ago. We went and got a survey done that pretty much gave us a status of what we had in parks and what we had in recreations, some of the conditions which were not very good. They also did surveys and went and talked to several hundred of our citizens, trying to get a feel for what they knew we offered, didn't. I think the report came back and told us that a lot of citizens didn't realize some of the programs and things we offered. But in that survey, we never asked them to go and help us make a decision on whether or not going forward we need new facilities versus old facilities. They went and done those things. We still have the challenge, I think, in our city to make sure that we adequately have facilities throughout this city to be able to help augment a lot of these other concerns and issues we just discussed with helping the schools, helping the police, fire, and all of these other things. And I don't think there's anybody here feels that we have adequate facilities in this city for what we're doing. And I think the challenge is, what do we do to try to do that? And we continue to get people to come up and talk about different things in their areas that need to be fixed, whether it's tennis courts or putting lights up and on all of those things, or some of these areas that the kids have just abandoned because there's absolutely nothing there to attract them. And so, again, I think it's our job to make sure we look, and just like we went through this gyration, we can't afford to do everything, but we can afford to look at where the biggest need is from a population standpoint, from a socioeconomic standpoint, from all of those different things that could give us the best bang for our buck. And I know some of you have privately, even publicly, been beating me over the head with the Truxton thing. That piece was derived by a lot of folks because of, including myself, because of those components, not politics. I mean, if you looked at politics and looked at who voted in this area versus there are other areas that need something, you would clearly say you'd be crazy to go and help that area. So it wasn't politically. This is our job, I think, as a council, that to make sure we put things in that can help, to be able to help our schools and all of those things. And looking at all of those different scenarios and looking at the land that we have available there, I really think that we need to take a cash fund out of our surplus and build a community/recreational facility there, incorporate it in with the Charles Peak Little League fields to make a complex there to be able to help. There's at least 7 neighborhoods around there that really don't have anything that's even close or remotely close to a recreational facility. I mean, think out in the Douglas Park area, there is the JFK Center that they have almost abandoned.
You know why they've almost abandoned it? Because it's fallen down, Mayor. If you read the $69,000 study, said the first priority should be fixing what we have. JFK facility is literally falling down. You got the Cavalier Manor Center. You got the Ebony Heights. Thank goodness the Sheriff's Department went out there a couple years ago and rebuilt that. We're not fixing what we have. And the study, you might not agree with the results of the study, but the study did charrettes all over the city.
I sat in on them.
Have you read it? Because
absolutely.
Its recommendation is that a facility be built in the Churchland area. The zip code's 23703, one in Craddock. I think if another rec facility is built other than Churchland, and also you mentioned where the children live. The children live right where the study said put the rec facilities. I personally think since we got a rec facility going in the Craddock area, that if we're going to build the second facility, it should be in the Cavalier Manor facility. Yes, because the facility they got is nothing but a brick ranch that's literally falling to pieces. And the pool is dilapidated. We put money in it every year. I think Cavalier Manor is where it should be, the second one. The first one should be in zip code 23703. But I agree with you. We definitely need rec centers. Just don't need them where you want them.
Well,
That's right.
I think
And Cavalier Manor is certainly situated geographically very close to Truxton. And
No.
matter of fact, if we would
No.
do Cavalier Manor, I think we should look naming it after the Randalls, who got the first rec facility going. So
the Truxton area consists of at least 7 neighborhoods that have between Acadia Heights, Truxton, Douglas Park, Dale's Home, Lincoln Park, Prentice Park, and Brighton, and then you also include.
well, you can throw all kinds in there, but I'm telling you.
No, I'm just telling. Hold, let me finish. I'm telling
read
you.
the study.
The study gave us a population that did not factor in the other needs.
It's
It
got
did not
the
factor
children.
in socioeconomics, and if you were to spend money over in the south side or over in the Churchland area, and if you could only do one, and if you knew the problems and things that existed in one area, why would you avoid that area to go put it over in the area that probably would not have the biggest return on the investment when it came to police, fire, and all of these other social issues that are hindering our community?
I think the people who pay the bills in the city, the taxpayers, deserve a facility.
So you're saying people in Truxton don't pay taxes?
I'm not saying that.
They may not
but
have as much revenue, Bill.
You're basing on socioeconomic status. And I say we don't pay $69,000 for a study, and just because it doesn't come back with what you want it to read, that you ignore it.
Okay.
You
So
could,
let's.
you could always
Go ahead, sir.
fund the school, ask them to open their gymnasiums up after school. I'm pretty sure they'll like to come back in, and because when you build this building, you got a reoccurring cost. You follow me? You can go ahead, get the schools open, their gyms up, give them a couple more $1 million.
We would pay for it. I
Yeah.
mean, and being on the operating. And that's consistent with page 49 of that study. Big section on the use of schools as meeting places for parks and recreation. Even has an inventory. Now every elementary school has a gym, or what looks like a gym. Early in the budget process, I had a conversation with David about the joint use. He said, by all means.
We said that 2 years ago, John, and we haven't done a John Brown thing.
I think,
Okay? We keep saying, okay, we can use schools. We even threw churches in there. Let's lose churches too. We can use anything until we put our mouth and foot on the pedal and do something. We're not going to affect what's going on in our communities. And you look in that community where we have some of our worst numbers in all categories, and tell me where we can go do something tomorrow with money that we have. Tell me the school that we can go and add on to that's centrally located to be able to affect all those kids, and I won't have a problem. But to sit here and say, yeah, we can use those, the schools need their facilities for their programs. And you have kids that are not in that. And the kids that are associated with the schools is less than 10%. So you got 90% of those kids that can't use those facilities while JV and varsity things are going on. So you're going to go to the 90% of the kids that are not in schools and say, you can only have rec on Saturdays when the school's not using them, or the school's not practicing this Thursday, so you're going to run out and tell everybody you can use it this Thursday. We need something where these parents and these kids can come so we can start working on that 90% where I think the biggest bang for our buck is. And that's the whole rationale with what I'm using. I'm in favor of picking 1 or 2 schools. I'm in favor of putting a pool at a school on this side and a school on the Churchland side, so we won't have to do that. But pick one and let's get something started. But that's not going to affect those 90%ers that are not involved in school sports and activities, that are walking through the neighborhoods every day. From 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock is where we're losing most of these kids.
You have 3 schools of JV and varsity programs. That's it. You have
The high
3.
school.
You have Churchland, Norcom, and Wilson. You still have 15 more schools that we could maybe find the rest of their money, or even give them more if we use their facilities versus buying one. So,
But do you agree to put and invest in the area where the city can get its biggest bang for the buck, or the area where, because there's more population and people can afford to do
It's more
different?
children in those areas. That's why the study recommended them, Mayor.
No, but I specifically asked, when they brought the study back, did they use all of those criterias dealing with density and socioeconomics and in an area, and they said absolutely not. So you're missing a factor where if there's more kids out in Churchland and the livelihood and the well-being of the kid in Churchland versus the livelihood and the well-being of kids over in
So you're
in
gonna
Douglas Park or
penalize the kids in
No.
Churchland.
I'm just saying
because
if you
the
got
study said put a rec center in zip code 23703.
I'm saying if we can't do one, I told you I was in favor of doing something in
That's
both
the one
areas.
they said build first.
But if we had to pick one first, it would be in the area where the kids have the greatest need that would give us the greatest return with schools, crime rates, graduation rates, and all of those things. And that's why I said the area where the greatest need is not over there. I didn't disagree with the study, but I'm trying to rationalize, if we can only do one thing, which one would you do first? Wouldn't you do it where you get the biggest
No.
bang for the buck?
Well, the bang that you say,
Right.
but I don't think a rec center is going to help the dropout rate, the graduation rate. Rec centers don't do that.
Oh, yes, they do, sir.
They might keep kids off the street, give them something to do, but they're not going to help them with their studies at night. Or if they don't have a parent saying they're going to whip their butt if they don't do their homework, a rec center is not going to do that.
I think community centers, and speaking as a kid that grew up in one, understands the importance of what a community center does. And it does do those things, Bill. As a matter of fact, if you even look back in history,
Show
the
me.
cities even went out in that area. Probably in 1970, out in the Truxton area, there was a plan to put a pool out there with that community center and other things. Yeah, they do that. That's what community centers do for kids that are from areas that parents can't afford all of the other things. That's the importance of those things, and that's why I think myself and others here focus on that. Most of us, if it wasn't for a community center or a rec center. Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We had these discussions a couple years ago, and we did not agree, and so we commissioned a study because we couldn't agree. The study was going to come back and tell us. Now, we had the staff, the company that did the study, had the staff working on the study, had some fine citizens. Lieutenant General retired Alonzo Short, Commander retired Curtis Gunn, and Mr. Brian Mills. Three outstanding citizens who sat on this. And contrary to what you said, my talking to some of them, they did consider some of the things you said weren't considered. Now, the study has come back and told us where the recreation center should be. My personal opinion, we can't afford to build one anywhere right now because we just dug into.
That's right.
We just dug into our fund balance for the schools.
give the school more money.
And if we could dig into it for another $5 million, I'm sure the rating agency is going to have a ball with that. So everybody got a personal opinion about where they think the recreation center to be. I like what the study says, and I agree with some of what Mr. Moody said. When and if we can afford to do rec centers, I think we put Truxton at the top of the list for repairs because it does need some major repairs and maybe even expansion. But to build a megaplex there when the kids aren't there is probably not the best thing to do.
Kids aren't there? What do you mean?
In comparison to other parts of the city. Now, let me finish.
Kids aren't in Douglas Park?
Let me finish.
Okay.
We have major property and land in and around the Churchland Middle School area that could be redesigned for a megaplex. We could take the Cavalier Manor Rec Center as it is now, redesign it for a megaplex to offer everything you want to do, and you would have a megaplex on both sides of the city.
Absolutely.
We could still upgrade and expand Truxton to accommodate kids there and have two major plexes at the same time.
Tucson doesn't have one right now. You're talking about Douglas Park, that little JFK?
Yes.
Okay.
We could still expand that.
A lot of land there.
There's plenty of land there.
Got all around Willett Hall.
We could still expand that, put the pool and everything there if we need to, but put the megaplexes in other places when the money becomes available. And I think that we can make that a priority for the next budget season.
That's right.
But I don't see how we find $5 million to do it this season. And I think that way you would accommodate those people who live north of the Churston Bridge who say we have nothing. You would accommodate Cavalier Manor, which has been there for a long time.
Long overdue
Long
for
time,
rehab.
and long overdue for your rehab. We could do that, and we could fix up and expand Truxton, and get them on good solid footing all at the same time.
Meanwhile, Craddock's going to be underway because of the private.
Credit's going to be done, so I'm not. So that's why I didn't include them.
Well, that's why I took it out. We already committed to
because they're
that.
going to be done. And that would give you give you four new complexes.
And 2 megaplexes.
I like the strategy. I'm just saying, right now, there's nothing in Truxton. And you have something in the other ones where people are at least using.
We don't have nothing in Churchland.
And, no, yeah, but the kids out there are using it because most of them parents are paying for them to go. I think that's a need that we need to meet, but I'm saying that need isn't as important, in my view, from a socioeconomic standpoint, Mr. Cherry, than over there in the south side where they have nothing. Okay, and Lincoln
They have
Park.
something, it's just.
No, they don't have it.
Not acceptable.
Elizabeth, they don't. The Civic League doesn't even meet anymore at the JFK Center because it's not even adequate for people, seniors, to sit and meet. They moved to a church, I think, a year ago.
That's why
Okay.
we need to go in there now.
So you can't even get
fix it.
seniors over there,
That's why-
and kids aren't in there.
That's why we can go in
It's
there.
a mess.
We can go in there. We need to go in there and fix it. We go in there and fix it and look at expansions. I'm not debating that part. We can do that. But the main issue is we have to plan for this, and we have not planned for it. And I
A
think
great retreat topic for
Right.
going forward.
Right. I think it's a retreat topic. We figure out how we get there, and maybe in the next budget season, and because unless there's another $20 million surplus, I don't see how we.
To the Vice
how we do
Mayor's
it.
point, we're discussing something we don't even have money to do
I
anything.
disagree. We've got money
If that's the
to
case,
build
we
us
got
an-
the money,
Hold
we
on,
need to
Mr.
give it to
Meeks.
the school board.
Well, we just discussed that. We have funding to build a center, okay? And I'm saying, Mr. Cherry, if you're saying the south side in those areas where those kids have absolutely nothing right now can take a back seat until you go out in Churchland and do something. Is that what you just said?
That's not what I said.
Okay.
That's not what I said. I said we could do all of them in the next budget at the same time.
You're gonna do all of them next year. So we can't do nothing now, but we're gonna do them all next
If we
year.
plan for them, because listen, in 60 days, we came up with a way to cover $180 million. So I think if we plan for a whole year, we can figure out how to do these rec centers between now and the next budget season. We figured out in 60 to 90 days how to fix our pension plan. We've been talking about it for the last 3 years, but the answer came in less than 90 days.
You know what? You're
And you
absolutely right.
And you got employee raises.
And we got raises.
You got a lot of things.
Mayor, there's only one way to settle this.
Hold on,
by-
I'm getting
by
ready to go around it.
consensus.
That's where I'm going right
That's
now.
the round table.
Bishop, what is your?
Before I say anything, my church is in the Truxton area, and there are mega children and kids in the Truxton area. I see them, talk to them all the time. One of the things that they talk about is a rec center, because there's nothing there for them. If y'all would give me the land behind my church, then I'd probably build a rec center. I'm open for that, or lease it to me for
Well, it's city
99
owned and it's
years.
been sitting there 20 years empty.
Hey, that's a retreat topic too. We can talk about that. We can talk about that.
Hold on, let's just go around and make sure we get a feel.
To finish what I
What's
needed
your
to say.
question? Do you want to take it out of the fund balance right now, right, this year? Is that what you're getting the consensus on?
I'm saying right now, I would propose that we build a community/recreation facility on the city property at Deep Creek Boulevard and Portsmouth Boulevard in Truxton that's been sitting idle for the last 20 years, okay, and cap at $5 million to cash fund that facility. and it would cover all of those areas in the south side area where there's absolutely no facilities and no recreation center / community
Okay,
center. Okay.
let's see who's in favor.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna start Bishop and come around.
I was starting, but y'all kind of cut me off a little bit.
Go ahead, Bishop.
As I was saying, there are a lot of kids in the Truxton area, and I do see the need for a rec center there. I see the need, and that's not just hype because I'm there, but I see the need. A lot of those kids, like I said, I dialogue with on a daily basis. So I see a need there. I see a need in Churchland. I see a need in the Cavalier Manor area to be fixed. The building in Douglas Park is a wreck. To try to fix that up is just like trying to fix the neighborhood facility up. I played basketball when it was called the Armory before it became the neighborhood facility. That building needs to go too, but that's another story. So I see a need there in the Truxton area. I do. I talk about it all the time to my colleagues in that area.
But do you want to take $5 million out of the fund balance? That's the question, yes or no?
I don't mind.
Okay, so that's.
Elizabeth?
No.
No? Dan? No? Ms. Randall?
You know, I'm just listing. The Cavalier Manor came about as a result of the developer who wanted to build houses and sell them to people of color. Let's call it like it was. And in order to bring the caliber people in that they wanted, the swimming pool was the icing on the cake. Prior to that, there was no place for children of color to go in to swim in the area. And that was a smart way to put that out in that area. That's how that happened to have come about. I know because I was at the table with George C. McLean and them when the developers talked about it. I'm not that old. But by the same token, it paid off. We were able to pull the children from Truxton and Douglas Park. I can remember Mr. Anthony and the others coming over to swim out at that swimming pool. Prior to that, there was no place in the city for children of color to go to swim. As a result, as we've branched out, there should be some other areas in there. And Truxton has been a deprived area in the city for a long time, as other parts of the city have playgrounds, swings and things for the children. Yes, it's a need. It's an older community, but there are a lot of young people out there. And if they don't go out there, we're going to build larger jails because they're going to get in trouble. We got to face the fact young people have to expend that energy. I think we need to look at the master plan. Where would be the best place for it? Truxton is an area in dire need. If he wants to donate his land.
No, y'all donated.
Okay, all right. But I know where you're coming from. But that
He wants it, but he
area,
don't want it that bad.
yes, but what I'm saying, that is a crucial area out there. We are losing a lot of young people. Go with me into the jails of the teens that are coming out of those areas in that jail. Then I know in Churchland, there's a need out there too. But these are near areas where parents do not have the training and the know-how to guide their children. And if we don't, we're going to need to build a bigger jail for you to come out and
Do you
visit
want to
us
spend
this
fund
evening.
balance
Okay,
right
so
now,
you're
or
in
you want
favor
to
of-
talk about it in July?
Okay, she's in favor, I'm in favor.
Nay.
No? Paige? No, okay.
I feel
So
we
we got
need to
3
do
in
it.
favor and 4 against doing it, all right.
Okay.
So we'll make it a retreat issue, all right.
All right,
All right, next
fine.
issue, anything else? Mr. Manning, you have anything? All right, we're adjourned.
Okay. Let it not be a long week.
for tomorrow night?
Thank you, sweetie. I don't.
Yes, please.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
I just want it to
Please
quiet
bring
me.
back